Musqueam, Catsi, Semiahmoo, Tawasin, Kikat, and Coquitlam peoples. So just to give everyone a little agenda, so we're all on the same page, first the panelists will introduce themselves and they can give a little bit of background about themselves, the position they work for, and the company that they work at. After that, they will answer the student-submitted resume and cover letter questions. The second segment will be they will be answering the interview etiquette questions that were also student-submitted. And at the very end, or last segment, is they will be dissecting real KPU students' resumes and cover letters. But don't worry, we sensitized all the information. So if you do come across your resume, no one's going to tell. So don't worry. And the last thing we're going to do, and if time permits, we will do some last minute questions. So now that we jumped right in, this would be a good opportunity for the panelists to do a little introductions about themselves. So Taffy, would you like to go first and introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, for sure. Can everyone see me? Or only can you see me? I just want to make sure.
Yes, yes.
So, hi everyone, my name is Taffy, and I'm the operations manager at Canadian Ecosystem Institute. We're the title sponsor for KPU's Careers Day. And I personally have lived in China for many years, as well as a few years in New Zealand. And I moved to Canada a couple of years ago, and I found synergy with CI's purpose in building and constructing the bridge for Chinese Canadian businesses. And as operations manager at CI, I'll be able to share some of the experiences I have as a young professional myself. So yeah, that's a brief introduction about me. And CEI is a marketing, research, and communications company, and we thrive to build.
That's amazing, and thank you, Taffy.
Chinese.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. Go ahead. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, we just wanted to say, we really appreciate and we really think that your international experience would really help KPU students, as we do have quite a large international population. Up next, we would like to introduce Vicki. Vicki, would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, perfect. Just give me. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Just having some issues unmuting my mic there. But hi, everyone. My name is Vicki, and I work for BE Power Equipment. So a little bit about myself. I'm actually a major in psychology, studying at SFU and going into human resources here. So I've only been with BE for about 4 or 5 months now, and it started off as a contract position. But because we are quite busy and our company is growing, I recently signed on for a permanent full-time position here. And then a little bit about BE Power. We are one of the leading manufacturers of different power equipment. So things like pressure washers, compressors, water pumps, and generators. And we are a family-owned company. So our owner, Curtis Braver, is actually the 3rd generation owner. And our headquarters is out here in Abbotsford here, and we actually operate internationally right now. So we are currently growing, looking to kind of meet with the future job seekers here, anyone looking for a future opportunity with BE, and hopefully I'd be able to give some insight to you guys to what we're looking for.
That's amazing, Vicki. Thank you for that introduction. Obviously, because you started off in arts, but then you landed in HR, we really appreciate you talking about your career path and how you ended up in HR. Up next, we have Katrina. Katrina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Great, thank you. So my name is Katrina McGuire, and I am a talent acquisition specialist for BCAA. I've spent close to 6 years in recruitment, so my experience is within HR, the HR function, but specifically talent acquisition, and I previously worked for an agency before joining BCAA about a year ago. So for those of you that haven't heard of BCAA, we essentially serve 1 in every 3 households within British Columbia, and we provide products such as home insurance, car, travel insurance, Evo Car Share, probably a service that many of you have used in the past. And then we have auto service centers across BC as well. So we're also hiring, and we're hiring some summer students right now. We just got approval for 25 summer students across BC, so would love to connect and excited to be here.
That's great, Katrina, and we can't wait to catch you at Career Day as well. For the last panelist, we have Kajal. Kajal, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Kajal. I was really excited to join this panel being a KPU alum. So I did my BBA in HR and I graduated in 2018. I now work for TransLink. So I've been with TransLink since I graduated. I originally started as a contractor similar to Vicki and turned into a full-time regular employee later on that year. And I support recruitment for the corporate function. So I'm sure everyone knows about TransLink or have used their systems before. So we're SkyTrain Bus, Transit Police, West Coast Express, Canada Line, and I do the recruitment for head office positions.
That's great. It's always great to have a KPU alumni come back and help out. So once again, we would like to thank our panelists for giving us their times and answering some of our questions. So just to jump right in, the first segment is going to be resume and cover letter questions. So panelists, if you don't mind reading the question out loud, if you're able to, they will be visible on the screen, just for some of our viewers who may not be able to actually view the question. So the first question is for Taffy. And Taffy, if you don't mind reading it out loud, if possible.
How do I write an interesting introduction for my cover letter? And is it a must to include a unique selling proposition in the intro? I'm an average student and I do not know what is my USP. Therefore, I often just summarize a company's website and say, I would really love to be part of your team because ... Okay, so it is definitely okay to not know or not have a USP when you're a fresh graduate or when you're still pursuing your degree. But during your time as a student, you've definitely done a few projects in various classes. And I think it's good to include that in your resume. And it's definitely fine to just, use these projects from school to summarize and to demonstrate specific skills that you've had or you've learned or that you got equipped in, and to use that and be like, hey, I actually have these kind of skills and I think it's applicable. So yeah, that's my short answer.
No, that's great. Thank you for that feedback, Taffy. And with the other panelists, if you feel like chiming in, please do, but there's no obligation. So at this time, does anyone else want to jump in? All right, that's perfect. Up next, we have a question for Vicki.
Okay. Hello, Vicki. Your advice on my complicated situation would be highly appreciated. I need to know what I should and shouldn't mention in my resume, considering the following facts. My work experience, mostly import-export coordinator, along with some other part-time jobs, do not match my degree in chemical engineering from Iran. Right now, I'm studying IT at KPU and have been working as a security guard in the past 5 years after immigration. What should I include or exclude from my resume? So quite a bit of information there, kind of from diverse backgrounds and industries as well. From my opinion, I would say with your resume, do include all of your work experiences. When we typically look at your resume, if there are any gaps, we do kind of want to know what you were doing during those gaps as well. So even if it didn't necessarily go into that field or is related, do you just add it on there? What I would do is when you are describing your various roles or duties, just kind of relate it back to the job description. Did anything you do that could potentially help you in that future role? So I would include, of course, your key experiences, but kind of tailor the description to match with the employer's description.
That's great. Thank you, Vicki, for that very insightful question, or the answer, sorry. So the next question is for Katrina.
Great, and sorry, there it is. So how does a recruiter or hiring manager actually check if a candidate knows how to do the job? Do you trust their qualifications/work experience on their resumes, or do you rely more on their references? So that's interesting. I think in terms of checking if you can actually do the job, it would depend on the type of job that you're applying for. Can say personally with the jobs that I've recruited for, there haven't been any practice-based skill tests that we've necessarily provided candidates. So we do look at, the qualifications on your resume, and I think part of that is trust, and you're looking for integrity in the person that you're hiring and assuming that they are being honest. But the other part would be the reference stage. So we look at, okay, what company did you work for? What was your position? And what are you listing as your qualifications and the scope of your role? And what are you articulating to us? And then we're going to actually confirm that with your reference. So best practice would be never to embellish your actual qualifications. Always sell yourself on your drive, your desire to learn, your aptitude, because you're going to be much more successful in that situation. And inevitably, we'll find out at the reference stage, or even worst case scenario, we'll find out when you actually start the job, and you're not going to be set up for success because we're not prepared to, provide you the right training that you need to be successful.
That's very insightful, Katrina. And actually, just to ask a follow-up question, let's just say with a lot of entry-level students who just graduated, if they feel like their references aren't really relevant, let's just say if they just worked at some summer jobs and stuff like that, should they still include those as references, or should they just not have any at all?
They would definitely need to include those as references, yeah, because the reality is, no matter, even if your job is unrelated, let's say, to the job that you're applying for, we're still going to want some professional reference to understand, okay, what is your work ethic like, your interpersonal skills, your reliability, and so your previous employer can speak to all of that.
Great, thank you. Thank you, that is awesome. Up next, we have Kajal.
Yeah, so this one has to do with my personal experience with KPU in the co-op option. So how should I list my co-op placement on my resume? Should I include work experience ahead of education, assuming I have all the qualifications? Currently in the computer systems diploma at KPU. So this one was interesting. When I first started applying for co-ops, I didn't have any experience. So in that case, I would list my education above because it was more relevant. But as soon as I landed my first co-op, I then had experience that was more relevant to the position. So then I would go work history first and then education. So my recommendation would be whatever is relevant to the role and what experience you have. So whichever one is more, I guess, that would stand out, and you would just adjust your resume and cover letters accordingly every time you apply to a job. Hopefully that answers the question.
I think it did. That was great. Thank you.
Cool.
So the next question is back to Taffy.
For Taffy, what should a candidate do if they know how to do the job because they have the qualifications but lacks the experience? For example, a relevant degree or certificate for the position but no experience. What should they talk about in their cover letter? For this question, interesting. I think it's okay that you don't have experience. A relevant degree or certificate for the position. You can definitely initiate that when you start writing the cover letter. For example, you need a very interesting introduction. It doesn't have to be specifically, oh, I have experience. You can start off something about your personality. You can highlight the transferable skills. You can highlight, for example, a quote that you think is relevant and why is it important to you, which shows that, okay, you actually wanted this job, even though you don't have experience, and use other stuff, the certificates you've got during class, during lecture, during courses. Use those and say, I actually do have the qualifications, but I apply it in school, in lectures, just not real life job experience. And I would focus more on the passion rather than the experience itself, because sometimes your attitude matters a lot, and it actually stood out. Especially myself, when I'm hiring interns, there's a lot of interns that actually come to apply at CEI that doesn't really have any job experiences. They've had probably grocery clerk experience, and that's not relevant to anything, business analysis or anything like that. But they do highlight their passion and how much they want it. And the attitude shows itself. So yeah, that would be my answer. I hope that answers the question.
I think that's a very interesting approach. How you can actually list your experience from being a student from your relevant degree and how that can actually be relevant experience. So that's a very good point, Taffy.
Thank you.
Up next, we have a question for Vicki.
Okay, so I'm currently deciding between going to get my master's in business or getting my CPHR. My goal is to be the head hiring manager for a large, respectable organization. Which one do you think would look better on my resume, or do you think experience and good references are all I need? So this one, I would say depend on the company and what they're looking for specifically. In some positions, they may require some kind of degree, whether it be master's or a CPHR, whereas some other may look more at your experience or how many years of experience you have doing a certain task or role. So between master's and CPHR, of course, CPHR is more tailored to HR, so it's a bit more specific. I wouldn't necessarily say there is a big difference, just some companies do prefer the designation. But as in, I would say experience is a little bit more important. They, of course, would want you to have some kind of experience, especially in a manager role. And then for hiring managers, I would say it's a little different from HR manager, just because hiring is more specific into a just hiring role instead of the overall HR components. So for that one, again, I would say a bit more towards experience and having good references for that position.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Vicki. Up next, we have a question for Katrina.
Okay, so if a hiring manager spends only roughly 7 seconds when deciding whether your resume is good enough for further examination, does creating a flashy, pretty resume increase your chances of further examination? So I wouldn't say that a flashy resume would increase your chance of further examination. Unless maybe it was a marketing creative role, then I think if I was hiring for that type of position, resumes like that will stand out. I think that when you say pretty, I would say, is your resume clean? Is it all the same font? Is it spaced properly? Do you have the right headings in place? Yes, I think that's a big part of that first 7 seconds is I will look aesthetically. Have you created a professional resume? So I'm hesitant to use the word pretty, but I do think that your resume being clean and being presentable and having a very professional looking resume is something that we would look at, and that would make or break that first 7 seconds.
Great.
Also, typos. That's a bad one. If you have a typo, especially one that they catch within the first 7 seconds, that can easily just eliminate your resume. So sometimes we'll get 100 resumes for one role, and to an extent, we're just looking for reasons to eliminate a resume. So if you give that opportunity right away within that 7 seconds, unfortunately, that can, have your resume end up in the trash pile, in the overlook pile.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And just for students to let you know, the Career Development Center, we're always helpful. And if you ever need help with your editing your resume or your cover letter, it can really help you stand out from the hundreds of resumes that Katrina sees every day.
Can I also just add to that one?
Oh yeah, of course. Sorry.
I like Katrina saying like the first couple seconds it's mainly to look for formatting stuff, but I don't spend only 7 seconds. Like generally it's longer. I think there's a lot of like students and people that think that we like quickly glance at the resume, it's 7 seconds and we're done. It's kind of also a deeper dive. So ensure that you're including as much detail as possible so people don't check out your resume in the first 7 seconds. If you have stuff that is completely not related, then those 7 seconds matter. But if you have things that are related, we do spend more time, and it's not a quick 7-second decision if we would like to move forward or not move forward.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And actually, just a follow-up question on that. Let's just say hypothetically, Katrina and Kajal, whoever wants to step up, if you do find let's just say, spelling mistake or something, do you finish the rest of the resume, or is it just directly as not really that interested then?
Go ahead.
Sorry,
Katrina.
personally, I think it depends on how relevant your experience is. So like you said, Kajal, if you have relevant experience, put that at the front of your resume, because if you work for a competitor or you have really relevant experience, we're going to dig into that. So if there was like one spelling mistake, I would definitely give you the benefit of the doubt if your experience is relevant. If there's a bunch of spelling mistakes, then I would probably pass on your resume, because it would just be a flag in terms of either your written communication skills or the effort that you're putting in, and either one would be a bit of a deal breaker.
Right. That's a great point. Kajo, sorry, were you going to say something?
No, just agree with what Katrina said.
Perfect. Well, that's all right, because the next question is for you.
Yeah, so this one has to do with certain things on resumes that bigger companies like TransLink are looking for from candidates, like volunteer or awards, or is it all about work experience? So with positions at TransLink, the recruiters generally look really closely at the qualifications, so the education and years of experience. It depends if it's a union or exempt position. So for the union ones, it's a bit more stricter. So if you have the skills that we're looking for, a greater chance of you moving forward in terms of the education and years of experience. If you don't have it, unfortunately, we'll have to reject your application. For the non-union roles, it's a bit more flexible. In terms of awards and volunteer experience, if it's applicable to the position, definitely include it. It's all about relevance to the role. So you might have an award for coming first in a track race. If you're not applying for like an athletic position, might not be applicable to the position. But if it's something related to the role, I definitely highlight it. So it's all about relevance. We're looking, like Katrina mentioned in the last slide, we're looking for how related or relevant your experience is to the role that you're applying to. With the bigger company, like you've asked, it is very competitive. So we are getting a lot of applicants, a lot of people with those relevant skills. And it's important to make your resume stand out by mentioning you have those experiences.
That's great, and that's some great insights. Thank you. So up next, we have a question for Taffy.
How can I showcase to international companies that my experience being an international student in Canada can be an asset for companies to bridge the cultural gap, Eastern countries to Western countries? Oh, this is amazing. Personally, I'm also an international student, and you can highlight the fact that you study in Canada. You said that you have Canadian experiences and you have the experience of your hometown. You highlight the multicultural background, and I would stress on the fact that I can provide unique suggestions, unique thoughts because of like the various culture that I have been in. And then you can highlight the diversity, how it is important, and then as an asset for companies. Basically, you wanted to showcase yourself, just like Hajel said. You need to showcase yourself in terms of like why is your multicultural experience is important, and the fact that you understand various cultures, the fact that you show different respect is important to highlight. And when I'm looking at resumes, when I want to look for people to get on our business development team or to get on our research team, there are people that comes in and tell me they say 7 languages, and I'm like, oh, sweet. So what about the 7 languages? You want to talk about what exactly that sticks you out from it. Yeah, hope that answers.
That's great. Yeah, it's all about going more to in depth and how you can add a different perspective. So thank you, Taffy. That was great.
Yeah, especially diversity is a huge thing. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Taffy.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that especially diversity and multicultural is a very big thing in Canada. And in different international companies, they definitely want people with different perspectives that can bring to the table. Yeah.
Great. The next question's for Vicki.
I don't see the screen just yet, O'Neill. I'm still seeing.
Oh, sorry. I can just read it out then,
Okay.
if it works for you. Do unions and non-union companies look for different things on a resume? Do union places care more about volunteering in extracurriculars than non-unions? And do non-unions care more about work experience then?
I think Joel mentioned this earlier. She kind of answered this question in a way with tying it to TransLink there. But overall, in general, we are looking at the same things with unions or non-unions. Of course, again, going back to the idea of making sure the skills you put are relatable to the positions you're applying for, just kind of using the keywords that they're using, making sure it kind of matches or kind of showcases yourself and what you're able to bring to that position. Union, like Kajal mentioned, could be a little bit more strict on what they're looking for, specifically with your education or any degrees or diplomas they may need. And then with extracurriculars and volunteering, I think it's just in addition to those experiences that you have already. So mainly on your work experience and education, and then of course just the icing on top if you do have any other volunteer experience relating to that position as well.
That's perfect. No, thank you for that was quite insightful. The next question's for Katrina.
Great. So should I spend time talking about the company's history in an attempt to impress whoever is reading my cover letter, or is that a waste of time and space? I would say that that would be a waste of space in your cover letter. I think if you're looking to impress the company by letting them know what you understand about the organization, you could definitely list some of the company values and maybe how those values align with yourself. So kind of tie in why you embody those values, and so why you would essentially be a really good fit for their culture. But I wouldn't just list off the company's history to show them that you've done your research on understanding who the company is. I think you could, BCA, for example, is a BC born and bred company. We've been in business over 100 years. So if you wanted to reference, in one line that you were super impressed when you saw that the company had been around for over a century and loved that it was a local company that gave back to the community, like that would be great. But I would never just list off a bunch of information about the company history. It would just be a waste of your time and eliminate the space for you to write really valuable things that are going to get the recruiter's attention.
Right. So it's more important to be more insightful about what things impress you about the company than just listing, I guess, basic stuff you can find on the internet.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just tying it to you or a skill that you're trying to show. So if your goal is to show them that you are really passionate about working for the company, which is great, that's something employers look for, then make sure you're tying that into, why you're listing something about their history. Just like I do think a lot of companies, including BCAA, culture and values is incredibly important to us. We look for people with integrity and that have great customer service and teamwork, doing the right thing. So if you were to list some of our values on your cover letter and how you feel those values embody you and align with your values, that would be something that would be attractive to someone reading your cover letter.
Great. That's great advice. The next question's for Kajal.
Yeah, so can recruiters tell when someone's using an online template? I feel like it helps and it's cooler than anything I can make from scratch. So yes, I don't know if my other panel members can also tell when someone's using a template, but I've definitely started to pick up on some common use templates. So at first I had no idea, but then when I would see it come up a few times, I kind of recognized, oh, this is a template. So to my friends and family, the advice I always give is create your own. Personalize it and customize it. So I think there was a question earlier that asked about appealing resumes. So this is your chance to show your personality, add a little bit of color. Like on my personal one, I have a little bit of purple in it just because it's one of my favorite colors. So this is where you're able to add a little bit of your own design. It is a little difficult sometimes when you're not familiar with Word, but when I was in university, there's a class called CBSY, and if you have the opportunity to take that one, I think it was CBSY 1100. It was in my first year, so that one taught me a lot about formatting and how to use Word docs and other programs within the MS Office suite. Or there's a lot of online resources. So if you ever kind of are questioning how to put things together, just look online, but try to stay away from a template. We know if it's a template or not.
And just wanted to add on to that, Kajal. Yeah, good points with that as well, especially with Indeed as well. If you are applying for a position through there, Indeed has the option for you to kind of just enter your information, and it'll show us kind of like just a plain Indeed resume instead of your own personalized one. So always kind of just upload your own instead of using the Indeed templates as well, because those are very plain and there's not a lot of personality or style to those normal templates. So just always make sure to upload your own resume on there.
Yeah, and then to that, like that 7-second glance that we do, like we can do that quickly and say, oh, this is an original piece, like it stands out a bit more.
Great.
Can I add on to that?
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with what you said. And it is very obvious that things are from the template. But one thing that I think you are able to grab off from the internet is the format, like how to look clean and keep it consistent when you're applying the job that requires both cover letter and resume. You have to keep things consistent and like formatting everything. And yeah, template is very obvious. So, but the format, how you use it, and words you write, it will be the best if you can come up with your own words. Even if might not be the best sentences out there, just keep it also saves us a lot of time to do that. Yeah, to read simple sentences rather than like really complex ones. Just a suggestion. Yeah.
Thank you for all the panelists. Yeah, that was great that you guys all had the chance to comment on that. Perfect. So this is the end of the resume and cover letter questions. We are running a bit short on time, so we're just going to hold all the questions to the end, if that's okay with everyone. And we're just going to jump to our next segment, which is going to be questions about interview etiquette. Sorry. So the first question is for Taffy.
Okay. Do you only ask work-related questions, or can you also general questions about? Do you mean can you also ask general questions about?
Yeah.
Can you also ask general questions about the company, department of the company?
Sorry, I think my apologies for that, but I think what they're trying to say is like, can you ask general questions about just the company or the department?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. You definitely can stick with work-related only. You can also extend a little bit on personal, but definitely still work-related personal in terms of like, how does a day in the office work looks like? Or what are some expectations you expect me to achieve or expect this specific department to achieve in the next half a year or a year? So you can actually see like what is the company's vision and does it match with on yours? Because I think when you're doing an interview, one thing is you are picking the company as well as the company's picking you. So definitely ask any questions you have in mind and to just clear out things, all the doubts you have. But yeah, I definitely think don't only ask about work-related questions. If you want to, that's fine. But to leave like a better impression or deeper impression to the recruiter, you can ask some question that stands out.
Perfect. The next question is for Vicki.
How do I politely ask for a higher salary if I know I'm more than qualified and deserve a higher salary? So this is definitely a good question. It's not a conversation everyone would like to have, or it's easy to have, especially with someone you're trying to work for. So with asking for a higher salary, I would say definitely wait until they do give you an offer. I wouldn't say during the interview stage. Of course, they are still interviewing other candidates. Someone may be a better fit and asking for a little bit less. But when they do present you with an offer, if you would like to negotiate the salary, I would just say make sure you did your research, kind of look at the different surveys, what other companies are hiring for that position. and kind of have to sell yourself, kind of prove why and show why you think you deserve that amount, or that type of salary, depending on what responsibilities you may have, what experience or education you may bring to the table as well. And then, yeah, bring it up during the offer before accepting. Of course, be grateful and thankful for it. Thank them for the opportunity and the offer. And just say that you would like to discuss the salary because of XYZ. So kind of do a bit more research instead of just kind of jumping in there and saying, oh, I was expecting this amount without backing it up with any information. But yeah, just do your research and it doesn't hurt to ask.
Perfect. The next question's for Katrina.
Is it appropriate to talk about your intention of climbing the job ladder in the same company? So I would say absolutely. And like previous people have mentioned, when you're interviewing, remember that you're interviewing the company just as much as they're interviewing you. So if you're looking for an organization where you can spend a lot of time and grow and develop, you definitely want to make sure that that company does have those opportunities. So asking about those opportunities and talking to them about your career goals is great. I think where that can be a miss is when you have an assumption that you're going to move up in an unrealistic amount of time. So I think on average, it's typically every 2 years that someone would become an expert in their role and be ready for that next step. I'm sure that's different depending on the type of job and the industry that you're in. So again, do a little bit of research, get an understanding of what's realistic. Don't expect a promotion because you feel you deserve it by the amount of time you spent in a job. Promotions and opportunity for advancement are really there based on you proving yourself and becoming that expert and being ready to take that next step. So I think as long as you go in with realistic expectations, I think it's a great thing to talk about. And most organizations are looking for someone long term, and most companies are not just hiring you for the current position today, but hopes that you'll be able to grow within their organization as well.
Perfect. And Katrina, just to add another question to that, if you're applying for a temporary job or a contract job, is it still acceptable to talk about how you do want to eventually be a part of that company?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of contract and temp roles are put out there and typically have an opportunity for you to join full-time after. And a lot of companies, love that opportunity as well because they've obviously paid to train you and you know the organization. So once a full-time role opens up, it's a very easy transition for them as well to bring you right on. So I would definitely bring that up.
Perfect. So the next question's for Kajal.
Yes, this one has to do with the amount of questions they should ask at the end. And is it appropriate to ask them about their experience with the company? So with TransLink, most of our interviews are blocked off for an hour. So I said for this one, it depends on timing. Generally, if you have a lot of time left at the end of the interview, they'll kind of let you know, like we'll trigger our candidates to let them know, hey, we have this amount of time left. We'll open it up for questions. Sometimes there might not be any timing restrictions, so it gives you the opportunity to ask as many. But I would say pick your top 3 in your head before you go into this session. So the questions that you really want answered. So is it appropriate to ask them about their experience? Of course. I think that's great. Like everyone mentioned earlier, you're also selecting the company. So you want to know why you should join the company. And a good one to ask is, why did you join the company? How has your experience been? If you can describe the culture, what does the daily life look like the top 3 ones that you feel would help you make that decision. I know when I did my co-op positions, we would interview for a few positions, and then from there you'd kind of wait. But this is your chance to figure out what job and which company you want to work for. So be sure to, I would say, at least pick 3 top ones depending on time constraints.
Great. So this is the last round of interview etiquette questions, and this goes out to Taffy.
Question is it obvious to the interviewer when we have notes up and around our monitor or we have a Word doc on the side? If so, what tips do you? Yes, I would say it is quite obvious. In my personal experience, I do find the times where people are definitely just reading it off. One recommendation is always practice and record yourself prior to the actual interview, so you can go back and see what you actually look like and how many ums or ahs you said during the practice. And then that way you would get an idea and the physical picture of what you are, how you are presenting yourself. So I would not recommend reading it off from a slide next to you. You can have a little bit of notes on the side so you can, keep yourself on track on what exactly are the points you want to touch upon to show like you're a qualified candidate. But definitely don't read it off. It's quite obvious, at least in my personal experience. Yeah. It's not a bad thing to have. It will be the best if you don't read it off. And at the end of the day, you're just talking about yourself. These things should be in the back of your head. Because before you write your cover letter, before you write your resume, you definitely have to go through this thought process about what you have actually done, what are the actions, those things. So, yeah.
No, thank you. That was quite insightful. The next question is for Vicki.
What do interviewers look for in an interview? Are they looking for hard skill, soft skill, or are they finding someone that is suitable for the company's culture or anything else? I would say it's a kind of a balance between all of it. Of course, we are trying to find the best fit for the position. So of course, first off, looking at your hard skills, your experiences, but with each candidate, we kind of have to find the balance. If let's say person A has 5 years experience, but maybe not the best personality, we might compare that to the second person who may only have 3 years and was very sociable and good with communication. Those different things do vary and do kind of come into account when we do make our decision. So it's just a little bit of everything, just make sure you're kind of covering all bases pretty much, making sure everything is updated. And again, back to the point of making things relatable to the position. So of course, the skills are necessary and important, but at the same time, finding, of course, someone who's good for the company culture and fits in long-term with us is important as well.
That's great, Vicki. And just a follow-up question, actually, if let's say if you're applying to a startup company, which might have more of a relaxed environment and culture, what are some ways that you can kind of showcase that you might be a better fit for the culture? Is it okay to crack some jokes, maybe? Maybe if it's okay to tell some stories, or should you still kind of keep it more on the professional side?
For myself personally, I do like a few jokes here and there. Just don't go overboard with it. I've had interviews where every answer they give, they kind of make a joke out of it. So definitely don't do that. Cracking a joke here and there is not bad or anything like that. Just again, making sure, again, most of the time keeping it professional. And then if you're trying to show yourself, showcase your personality, sometimes interviewers will ask for your hobbies and interests at the end as well. So that's another way you can showcase your personality or what you're about as well.
Can I add something to that? Vicki said something that reminded me of something sometimes candidates do. So she said that sometimes at the end of each question, they crack a joke. At the end of each question, I have people saying, that's a great question. That it distracts you, because at the end of each question, if we have like a series of 10 or whatever amount of questions, if you say that at the end of each question we ask, it kind of takes away. And I know that sometimes you might have to pause. In that time, pause and maybe take a sip of water instead of saying, that's a great question, or cracking a joke.
Perfect. Actually, is there some other ways that, I know when some people say that's a great question, they're actually thinking, is there some other phrases that they could use instead?
You can be honest and just say, oh, just give me a minute. Let me think about a question, instead of just kind of word vomiting. And then you can't really take it back because you're too far in. So it's best to be honest. Just say, okay, I need a second to think about that, and then continue, instead of saying, cracking a joke or saying, that was great.
Perfect. So the next question is for Katrina.
Should I have a Zoom background if my actual background is messy? I have books and shelves behind me, or does having a Zoom background look weird during an interview? I'm curious to see everyone else's thoughts, but I think having a Zoom background is totally fine as long as it's an appropriate Zoom background. And it would be far better than you having a messy background. If for any reason you didn't want to have a Zoom background, you could easily just take your, if you have a laptop anyways, take your laptop and just go to a blank wall behind you and pull up a chair just for that specific interview. But personally, I think as long as the Zoom background is appropriate, I don't see anything wrong with it.
Perfect. Does any of the other panelists have some thoughts about this one?
I would agree with Katrina. If you have a messy background that you don't necessarily want on the camera, yeah, just add either a plain screen or something professional looking in the background, as long as it's appropriate.
All right. The next question is back to Kajal.
Yeah, so my focus is to successfully land a job opportunity through a co-op option. Any fresh advice? So I'm going to take this fresh advice as kind of 2020-21 advice. I think with the virtual world now, everyone's making more use of social media platforms and kind of using different areas to promote their jobs. So I think the first thing to do is I think most companies have social media handles. So check them out on Instagram. LinkedIn is a huge one. Twitter. I know TransLink's very active on Twitter and it's on LinkedIn. So follow the companies. Most of the time they'll have opportunities that they'll share via those channels. So then you can kind of be in the loop. Other than that, I can't think of any fresh ideas. I don't know if the panel members have any other suggestions.
If not, that's totally fine. We can just move on. All right, perfect. So thank you for all the panelists for answering your questions. We are still kind of running short on time. So before we get to questions, we're actually just going to jump into dissecting the dummy resumes and cover letters. So the first one is Taffy's resume. So I'm just going to put up Taffy's over here, and she has some great notes. Taffy, can you see the Word doc?
Yeah,
Perfect.
I can. I only made notes for the first bit of a section. So first thing, the formatting is very important. And I said move to the right corner, use the page space efficiently, because if you put it in 4 lines, you are literally shortening the length that you're available to put in your work experiences and all that. And then moving on to skills, I would put it as key competences or profile of yourself. Profile could be like a few sentences, like 2 to 3 sentences you wanted to highlight about yourself, and that's those keys. These key competences or the profile section is where recruiters first look at, see if you meet the qualifications or you have the specific technical skills, transferable skills where like very like that's the specific job is looking for. And then moving on to the experiences, you definitely want to list them in chronological order. And when you write your the job, the specific descriptions, what you've done, you want to essentially write it in the RATS format. So I pulled this out from my university stuff. RATS format essentially is results, action, task, and situation. For example, right here it says teach children crafts and games. You didn't really say how. You only said you did this, but you didn't really show how do you do it and what are the skills that you applied, or your entire thought process is just not out there. So people just be like, okay, anyone can teach children how to craft in games, right? So my example written down there with using the RETS model would be created and delivered to our workshop by developing through well-timed lesson plans and interactive activities to 20 summer campers aged 10 to 12. So in this way, you narrow things down so much more. You provide a lot more specifics. You provide who, what, when, and where. You provide what exactly you did, and always use a strong verb to start off your description. Thus, the description always started off with strong verbs. For example, like created, initiated, developed, all these. Yeah. And if you can't find a strong verb, Google it. that's how I wrote myself as well. Yeah, I hope this can show like a very big difference in how to build your resume a little bit better in terms of using the model. Yeah.
Great. No, that's definitely great. And I think you have one more note about education as well.
Oh, yeah. I would just say move the education up, because as a fresh graduate or just a student, education is just one thing, is the biggest asset you have, basically. And you want to highlight it. You don't want to put it at the end and say, oh, by the way, I have a bachelor's degree. Like, no, you want to move it forward. You want to say, I have a bachelor of psychology. Therefore, these are some skills that I have. And because a bachelor degree, it definitely means something, right? You would like to showcase this before you're speaking about your experiences. And that's how I would put my resume together like that. I'm not sure do other recruiters agree with me. And these are my notes.
Definitely.
I'm
I think.
happy
Sorry,
if
sorry.
students want these. Yeah, feel free to. Oh, it's okay. I was just saying, if students want these notes, I'm happy to share it. You can distribute it if you would like to. Yeah.
Perfect. Yes, we will. And Kaja, I think you had a point as well you wanted to add.
No,
Was
just
that
agreeing with what Taffy said. Like, if you're applying for a job that has to do with psychology, like, put that at the top. It's what, and you can arrange your job. Like, I used to have multiple versions of my resume depending on the role. So you're going to have multiple versions and play around with it for each job that you apply for.
perfect? Taffy, is there any other comments? Or I guess the final thing would be, would this make it to the second round of your resume or interview process? Or do you think this candidate at this moment might not be strong enough for an entry-level job?
I personally would put it in a trash pile, because I don't see the student putting in much effort writing this resume in terms of the language that's being used and in terms of how simple everything is. And you don't have that much stuff and you already exceeded 2 pages, and I don't see the necessity of that. Because if you just do a very brief Google search, how to write a resume, there's like already a lot of tips out there that you can follow, and things will come out a lot better than this. So when I'm hiring, this will not take into second round. Yeah.
Perfect. No, thank you for being honest. And this is actually some of the levels of some of the students' resumes. So this would be a great opportunity to point out to students that from an actual hiring manager, what are they looking for? And if this quality of resume is strong enough. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
So up next, we have Vicki's resume.
So I didn't have time to write down notes for it, but I'll kind of do a walkthrough of the resume here. So with my first glance, overall, the layout of the information is quite clean. And I do like for each position that they do have, they did put bullet points on kind of relevant skills or what they used in that position. So a couple of good notes there. Couple of changes I would do is kind of what Taffy mentioned with the experience. I do prefer to be in chronological order, just so I can kind of go through and follow along what you've been doing throughout the years instead of having to jump back and forth, trying to figure out if there are any gaps, what you were doing during those gaps or anything like that. And then overall with the formatting of it, I noticed the fonts, not necessarily all of them matched up. I think the context difference from the rest. So I would say just match it up a little bit more, pick a font or two and just stick with it instead of putting too many different things on there. For the interest, I would say if you are going to put interest, I would put it more towards the bottom. The pictures, I don't really mind. You can put it or not. Like we mentioned earlier, if you're applying for like a marketing or graphic role, it would be nice to see a bit more graphics or color to it. But if it's just any other position, it's not necessary for it. So move that kind of to the bottom, because again, like Taffy mentioned, you do want to showcase more important things instead of just hobbies right away. And then for this resume, I would, again, similar to Taffy, just kind of update the language and what you're using to describing your different experiences and what you're doing in those roles. Another good thing to add, especially for associate or higher level positions, would be any KPIs. So anything that you can measure your performance with. If you increase efficiency by a certain amount of time, increase productivity by a certain amount, be sure to put it in there as well. Again, just putting a bit more details, because if you're, for example, for one of the, I'll just use one as an example here. Servicing for the manager assistant position at Nailtown, maintains great relationships with customers through offsite and social medias. Kind of go a bit more into details, kind of saying how you did it, specifically what that helped with or what the purpose of that with, instead of just labeling or putting random tasks or general tasks. Because of course, if you do say customer service, we all have an idea of what that means, but what did you do specifically? And yeah, I think those are the main points from this resume.
Perfect. And I guess the final question would be, because this is an HR student, would BE hire or Power Equipment be interested in going further with this candidate, or do you think this resume isn't strong enough as well?
For this resume, specifically in HR, I guess I would say no, just because I do want a bit more details in what they were doing in each of their positions.
Perfect. All right. No, thank you for your honest feedback. Perfect. So the next resume is going to be from Katrina. Katrina, can you see this?
I can, yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, so overall kind of impressions of the resume. So the first top half where we've got the qualification summary, I think that first line there, you could tailor a little bit more to the type of position that you're applying for. To be honest, I found it a little bit wordy and I didn't 100% understand what this student was trying to say. So I think that can be a great opportunity to put a bit of an objective statement, even if it's just, you know, specific to customer service positions, to make it a bit more general so you don't have to tailor it for every single job that you're applying to. And then I would say for the qualification summary, I think it's great that you've got some key skills that you're summarizing. Prior to applying for the job, I would always try and pick out key skills specifically that you can apply to the position you're applying for. So if you're going to be really targeted, go through one job ad and pick out the key skills. Or if you're just applying to customer service positions, let's say in general, you can look at, okay, what are the top skills for customer service positions, and then just make sure that whatever skills you do genuinely have, you're tailoring those skills to the position that you're applying for. So I just felt like with the qualifications, it could have been a bit more tailored. In terms of the qualifications as well, like I think the resume in general does lack a bit of content. So if you can list, like you're listing customer service as being a qualification of yours, if you can list like where did you develop that skill is great. Put a little bit more proof behind the qualifications that you're listing. The next piece in the education, and to be totally honest, I don't know if 2.87 is a really good GPA. I would personally not list a GPA unless it was like a really good GPA, because I don't think it's necessarily super relevant for a lot of positions. If it is really relevant for the type of industry that you're applying into, fantastic, obviously list it. And then if it's really strong, if 2.87 is just an okay GPA, I would just leave it off. Like it's just an unnecessary point of information that you only want to list if it's in like that top 10 to 20%. And then when it comes to your experience, again, I think it's just a really short resume. So I think you really missed an opportunity. At Quantlin, I'm sure you do a lot of hands-on type of projects. So really listing what are some key projects that you've been a part of, and what skills did you learn, and how are they relevant to the job that you're applying to. So I would flesh that out a little bit further. When it comes to the H&M experience, huge miss just in terms of your dates of employment. So you can't really just say summers. 2019 and 2020, we would want to see specific dates. So if it's April to August 2019, and then April to August 2020, I'm definitely going to want to see very specific dates of employment there. So those would be my initial impressions. I think you can just build out more relevant content in your resume is the biggest thing that stands out for me. If I was hiring for an entry-level customer service position at BCAA, not the worst resume. I think overall, like, it's visually appealing. You put some effort into it. There's your education would be relevant. Your experience in H&M would be relevant. So I would probably give you a call, but I definitely think you could up your game.
Perfect. No, thank you for that honest feedback. And I actually had some questions of my own. When you were talking about how they could go more in depth with KPU and how it's very hands-on, would it be okay to actually list, let's just say, a higher level course and actually state what you learned in maybe a project or two? Or do you think that might take up too much space?
Yeah, so I think because this resume is only 1 page, I think you could easily have a 2-page resume, and I would definitely write that relevant coursework, those relevant projects, the skills that you learned in those projects. If your resume was already 2 pages, I would personally never suggest to have more than a 2-page resume, unless you had some amazing extensive experience, which you wouldn't at this stage in your career. So yes, as long as your resume is under 2 pages, I think that there would be more content you could put in, such as projects and coursework.
Perfect. And actually, my last question that I would love your answer to is, they have education, but then under experience highlights, they also list Quantlen again. Would it make more sense just to put all this information just under education, or do you think it's acceptable to also put it under experience highlights as well?
Yeah, so I personally, because I think, yeah, so that person is summarizing some of the experience that they've gotten at Quantlen. I personally think it's fine to leave it under the word experience, because it's obviously not work experience, it's just experience highlights. And again, because they have so little work experience, I think they kind of have to put it here, versus, I don't know, the education piece might be a little bit too long, but I'm not super picky on that, so I'd be curious if there was other opinions.
Well, thank you for your honest feedback, Katrina. Really appreciate that. Oh, sorry.
Can I add on to that?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of your question, under education, if you don't want to go on and on, you can split your projects, the project you've done, under experience or under school-related work. And then under education, you can put your degree, and you put relevant courses, and you list out different courses, the course full name. For example, myself, I'm a healthcare student and business communication student. And if I want to go into perhaps get a policy analysis job, then under the key relevant or under the relevant courses, I would put Canadian healthcare ethics, or I'll put policy, whatever related course. But like usually 2 to 5 courses is enough to show that you've taken these courses. And if your grades in those courses are great, perhaps like about 80 or 85, then you can put it up there as well, just as a very solid evidence to say that, okay, I am knowledgeable in these, but I don't have experience. Yeah.
No, perfect. That's some great advice. Thank you for that, Taffy. So the last one we have, that's all the resumes we did, and hopefully students got a good idea of the different levels of some of the resumes and what's expected and different. So next we're going to go through a cover letter, and that's going to be done by Kajal.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people think cover letters are not really relevant, but I feel like it just puts your complete package together, and it shows that you put some effort into your job application. So definitely think it's important to include a cover letter. First thing, I kind of wrote that overall it was pretty clean formatting, and I like that. It's easy to follow. For the title, so a lot of questions that we get often is, who should we address the cover letter to? In most cases, I say the hiring manager is fine unless you know who the individual is. So I know for the co-op positions, it lists the point of contact. So if you know the point of contact, awesome. If you don't sweat it. Just put hiring manager or recruiter or hiring committee. Another point that I liked was they put what position they're applying to. So sometimes you're applying to a lot of different roles and you might put the wrong position. So super important to double check it, but it's always important to put which role that you're actually applying to so that we know. And if you do apply to multiple, we know that you're able to make a difference between the two. So you don't want to have the exact copy and paste cover letter for each job that you apply to, especially within the same company. In the first paragraph, I think I wrote, and I think we talked about it a bit earlier, why you're connected to the company. So you don't have to talk about the company history, just a quick, these are the values, and this is why it kind of stuck with me and why I'm interested in the company. So kind of have that quick tagline of why you want to work in the company. And then, so the second paragraph, you talked about KPU. So I asked if is it specific to the role, because they shared some information about Pastel, Porter's 5. Is that relevant to the role? If not, I recommended that you mention a project, a quick project, depending on space, that would be more applicable. The second paragraph, third paragraph, sorry, they talked about work examples. So I thought that was great. Important to share key achievements within the role. And then last comment, I just said maybe include your email address and a contact phone number again. And if possible, always nice to see an e-signature on it, just personal, but if you have that opportunity, we can just attach an e-signature if you have space. And generally I keep cover letters to 1 page and just be aware of the white space.
Perfect, thank you. And I guess the final question is, would this resume or cover letter kind of intrigue you to look at their resume or even go further on with their interview process?
Yeah, it would. It was nice and clean and organized, and they had all the relevant information that I would be looking for.
Perfect. No, that's great. Thank you for your insights. So thank you, panelists, for answering all the questions that were really greatly appreciated. So at this point, we will be answering some questions. We do have roughly around 5 minutes. So if there's any questions students would like to answer the panelists, this would be a great opportunity to type them in the chat. And once again, thank you, panelists. This was really appreciated. So I will just check the comment box. It seems like there's no questions at the moment. So if that's the case, oh, I think we got some things coming in. Sorry, just 1 second. I guess my Wi-Fi is kind of delayed.
Yeah, there's a question about how do we make cover letters different. So jobs are different. They would have different requirements. So you would have to, as well as tailoring your resume, you would have to tailor your cover letter to fit the job profile. So you might be applying for a position in one area, and then maybe if you're interested in another area and you see that job open in the same company, there are probably some transferable skills in both, but try not to keep them identical. Especially if like the same recruiter is working on it, it's just a copy and paste and looks lazy. So like I was saying earlier, for each job that you apply to, tailor your application, resume, and cover letter to both those.
Perfect. Does anyone else have any, or the panelists, would you like to jump on that question as well? If not, there's another question. This question is, what are some tips for beginning a job search? Is there anyone?
I guess I'll start off with that one. So when you are starting your job search, I would say kind of have in mind or have an idea of what you want to get into and the different positions that could be possibly in that industry or field, or maybe you're looking to join a certain company. kind of have an idea of what you're looking for, because if you're just going to just search up random jobs that are available, there are going to be a ton that are always hiring for. So kind of have a goal for yourself, and then when you do start applying for them, kind of tailor down to what are your expectations salary-wise, location-wise, tailor down to a certain group, just to kind of hone in your skills and what you're able to kind of offer them as well. And then kind of apply those resume tips and cover letter tips that we have been going through to apply for the position.
Perfect. So there is another question. Should we always submit a cover letter when applying for a position? Is that necessary? Taffy, would you like to tackle this question?
Yeah, sure. I was going to add on to the previous question in terms of like initial, job search in the beginning as well. In terms of that, LinkedIn is a really good platform for cold outreach. I personally do a lot of cold outreach, and there are a lot of formatting, not templates. You definitely have to write them yourself, right? But there's a lot of utilize your network. You go to university, you get that bachelor degree. It's not necessarily only for the bachelor degree. University is a huge network for you to actually grow your own, networks and your connections, and learn to use it. Be comfortable of reaching out. Be comfortable of cold calling. That's one thing I would suggest when you start finding a job without any foundation. And sorry, can you remind me again, what was the question for me?
Of course. Should we always submit a cover letter when applying for a position?
Not necessarily. It depends on the job. In the job description, they'll usually say, oh, no cover letter, or I want both cover letter and your resume. And there might be screening question, depends on who or where you're applying to. So I think that depends on the company's job description list rather than what you are able to prepare. Yeah. But definitely I agree to what Kajal said before. You need to tailor your resume and cover letter accordingly to each one.
Perfect. So there's one question: where should we look for co-op job postings? So Sheldon, we can actually answer that question. Yes, you can look at KPU Career Connection. That under one of the side tabs, there is a place just for co-op jobs, and that's only if you get into the co-op program at KPU. Otherwise, there's no other places unless you can look at LinkedIn and stuff. But then if you do look at LinkedIn for co-op jobs, they won't be through KPU. So just be mindful of that. So the next question is, what would happen?
O'Neill, I hate to interrupt. I do just have to hop into a 1:15 meeting. So I just want to say a quick goodbye. Thank you so much for inviting me, and really look forward to meeting all the students at the career fair.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
No worries. We'll just take 2 more questions. We don't want to take
Thank you, Katrina.
for the rest of the time. Thank you, Katrina. So the second last question is, what would happen if I copy? Would that be immediate trash cover letter? So I guess what that person's saying, that if you do find a cover letter that is a template and it's quite obvious, would you even look through it or not?
I think we touched on this one earlier, so it depends on how relevant your experience is to the role. Don't be lazy, I guess. If you're applying for a position, put effort into it. Like, we know if people are being lazy, if you just put like a one-liner in, a copy and paste, like, we see hundreds of resumes a day. Like, we know when people are putting an effort in, or if you're being lazy. So always put your best foot forward.
Perfect. So the last question, I don't know if Vicki, if you want to tackle this or the rest of them, but on a cover letter, should you put grades on that if you received in the B to A range, or should you just not put your grades in for the courses you've taken?
I would say, well, personally, for grades, I would leave that for the resume. For the cover letter, I would just kind of explain into that a bit more, like Adele mentioned earlier. How is it relevant? I guess, what did you get out of it? Not just putting that course in your cover or resume for no reason, just for it to be in there. So cover letter is a place for you to kind of expand on that a little bit more. Grades, I would personally leave in the resume.
Perfect. Yeah, so I know we're 2 minutes over time, so very sorry about that. But thank you again to our panelists. We really appreciate you guys' advice and you guys answering some student submitted questions. Please catch these amazing hiring managers and recruiters at Career Day on March 24th. And thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you again. And thank you to all the students who participated. We really appreciate that. And once again, yeah, if you would like to talk to these hiring managers one-on-one, you can do that on March the 24th. Perfect.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We will be ending this workshop now.